I've spent my entire life happily living in my sister's shadow. From the time we were kids, my absolute favorite thing in the world was catering to her, fetching her water, carrying her bags, grabbing her coffee. It was my chosen role, and I loved every second of it. So when Charlotte got into Columbia University, I pulled off a massive academic sprint, skipped a grade, and followed her right in. On move-in day, Charlotte rolled into our dorm suite with a security detail of 8 men. My new roommates were practically bowing, whispering about the campus princess, while I was quietly smoothed out the silk sheets on her bed. Only Elma Marshall watched me with a dry, knowing smirk. "You don't look like a roommate," she murmured, loud enough for the room to hear. "You look like her lady-in-waiting." I just smiled and kept tucking in the corners. Later that afternoon, Charlotte casually tossed her brand-new, lush pink quilted Chanel handbag onto my desk. "This shade suits you better anyway," she said. "Take it." As I beamed and caught the bag, Elma was just walking past our open door, her eyes lingering a second too long on the gold chain. Over the weekend, while Charlotte was away on a trip to Paris, Elma and I were the only ones left in the suite. "Zoe," Elma said, leaning against the doorframe, "do you have any idea what everyone in our class calls you behind your back?" I didn't look up from my laptop. "Charlotte Harrington's golden retriever." The next morning, my boyfriend, Zach Caldwell, the golden boy lacrosse captain, asked to meet me on the campus quad. Elma was already standing next to him, her eyelashes wet with tears. When Zach saw me walk up, his forehead creased into a deep, disgusted frown. "Zoe, can you please have some self-respect?" he snapped. "You're selling your dignity for a purse?" Elma comes from a modest background, and she still has more grace and pride in her little finger than you do. Elma gently tugged at his sleeve, her voice soft and trembling. "Zach, please don't. Don't ruin things with Zoe because of me. I'm not worth the trouble." I looked at their joined hands, and for a second, I actually had to suppress a laugh. Seriously? Had neither of them noticed that Charlotte and I shared the exact same last name? I adjusted the Chanel strap on my shoulder and let out a soft laugh. "You've been holding that in for a while, haven't you, Elma?" I said, looking her up and down. "What's the matter? Do you want the bag too? Too bad you can't afford it." Elma's face instantly flushed a violent red. Her lips trembled as she took a fragile step backward. Zach's brow furrowed deeper, and he stepped forward, shielding Elma with his body. The disappointment in his eyes was palpable. "Zoe. I had no idea you could be this cruel." I tilted my head. "Cruel? When did you become so incredibly petty and arrogant?" he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Elma doesn't have much, and you're using your hand-me-downs to mock her? Have you lost your mind?" He looked at me with pure distaste. I froze. Petty? Arrogant? My mind flashed back to a year ago, when Zach had stopped me outside the library. His smile had been as warm as mid-July. "Zoe, you're the brightest, most genuine girl I've ever met," he'd said, his ears turning bright red. "When you laugh, it's like the whole campus lights up. Be my girlfriend? I want to spend every day making you smile. I guess when the love is gone, being bright is just loud, and sunshine is just blinding." A sharp, sour ache bloomed in my chest. Elma pulled at Zach's sleeve again, her voice thick with tears. "Zach, don't blame Zoe. It's my fault. I wanted you to talk to her. I didn't want her to keep letting Charlotte treat her like a..." She bit her lip, cutting herself off as if the word was too dirty to utter. But she wouldn't listen. She just started flaunting her things to make me feel small. As her voice trailed off into a whimper, Zach's expression softened into pure adoration and pity. By now, our little drama had drawn a crowd. Students walking across the quad began to slow down, whispering in small huddles. Some recognized the Chanel bag, others recognized Elma. "Isn't that the girl who practically grooms Charlotte Harrington's hair? Why is she carrying Chanel? Please, the maid gets a bonus and suddenly thinks she's royalty. Keep it down. You don't want the master coming after you. Oh, please. Her master is out of the country. Right now, she's just a stray with no one to whistle for her." The comments drifted over, sharp and precise, as if they'd practiced the volume just to ensure I'd hear every word. Some of them laughed. Others surveyed me like a piece of cheap merchandise. Zach stood right there. He heard every single word, and he didn't say a thing to defend me. His eyes held the exact same judgment as the crowd's. Elma buried her face against Zach's arm, her shoulders shaking with faux sobs. But from where I was standing, I saw the tiny, victorious curl of her lip. It was almost comical. It was just a Chanel bag. I had a closet full of them back home. I'd spent my freshman year keeping a low profile because I didn't want the drama of being a trust fund kid, but my silence had apparently branded me as a servant. Charlotte had insisted on me rooming with her only because she wanted to make sure I was eating well. I took a deep breath. "I'll carry whatever bag I want, Elma. Why do you even care?" My indifference seemed to hit a nerve. Elma's delicate facade cracked, and she suddenly yelled, "Zoe, who do you think you are to talk to me like that?" Her eyes were wide and swimming with tears, but her chin was tilted up in defiance. "Yes. I'm poor. My family doesn't have money, and I've never owned a designer bag in my life. But at least I don't sell my soul to get one. What gives you the right to look down on me? The crowd's eyes locked onto me like tiny needles. I almost laughed out loud. I hadn't even started on her, and she was already playing the martyr. I took a step closer, looking down at her. Elma, what makes you think I can't afford this myself? Before Elma could speak, Zach let out a sharp, cynical laugh. Zoe, stop embarrassing yourself, he said, his voice dripping with irritation. Maybe you can fool these people, but you can't fool me. You wear the same 5 outfits every week. You order the cheapest salad on the diner menu. Last month, you spent an hour on the phone arguing over a $15 overage charge on your cell bill. Elma is at least honest about who she is. What do you have? He gestured to my bag with a sneer. A designer bag on you looks like a cheap knockoff from a street corner. Using someone else's charity to humiliate Elma, aren't you ashamed? A low murmur of chuckles rippled through the crowd. The pain in my chest felt like a physical blow. Last month had been Zach's birthday. He'd forwarded me a post of some influencer's girlfriend gifting him a rare, limited edition gaming console, adding a caption about how lucky some guys were. I wanted to buy it for him with money I earned myself. So, I took a job at a local espresso bar, standing for 8 hours a day until my feet swelled so badly I could barely get my sneakers on. I took on a tutoring gig for a high school junior, spending 2 hours on a noisy subway after classes just to get to their apartment. I saved every single penny. But on his birthday, he'd barely glanced at the console before rushing out to a frat party with his boys. He'd probably forgotten about it the next morning. I swallowed the lump of bile in my throat. Are you finished? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Whether I can afford it or not is none of your business. Excuse me. I turned to walk away. The crowd parted reluctantly. But I'd only taken 2 steps when Zach's voice boomed behind me, sharp and furious, like a man whose pride had been wounded in public. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel, and then his hand clamped down hard on my arm. Zoe, stop, he snarled. Elma had the decency to ask me to talk to you, and this is how you act. Who are you throwing tantrums at? I yanked my arm out of his grip. His face flushed with rage. You're going to apologize to Elma right now, and then you're going to give that bag back. Give it back? It belonged to my family. Who was I supposed to return it to? I didn't say a word. I just turned and kept walking. Behind me, Zach's voice reached a desperate, angry crescendo. Zoe. If you walk away right now, we are over. The whispers in the crowd died down instantly. Everyone was waiting for me to turn around, to beg, to apologize. I paused for a fraction of a second. Then, without looking back, I took another step forward. When I got back to the dorm, I pulled my laundry basket from under the bed. Charlotte was coming back the day after tomorrow, and her sheets needed to be washed. I stripped her bed, soaked the linen in the basin with detergent, and knelt on the bathroom floor to scrub. The cool soapy water covered my hands, grounding me. The bathroom door creaked open. Elma walked in, carrying a bundle of dark sheets. When she saw me kneeling there, scrubbing, a small, ugly smile touched her lips. She walked over, and with a casual flick of her wrists, let her sheets drop directly into my soapy water. Suds splashed all over my face. I looked down. A dark, rusty menstrual stain was smeared across her sheets, bleeding into the clean suds of Charlotte's linen. I slowly raised my head. What do you think you're doing? Elma crossed her arms, her chin tilted up. I started my period. My cramps are awful, and I'm too tired to wash this. Since you're already doing laundry, you might as well do mine. You're so good at washing other people's things anyway. She smiled, her eyes glittering with cheap victory. We're roommates, Zoe. Don't be selfish. I slowly stood up, wiping the suds off my hands with a towel. I looked at the blood-stained sheet floating in the basin, reached down, pulled it out, and shoved the dripping wet fabric right into her chest. Wash your own damn sheets. I knelt back down and went back to scrubbing Charlotte's linen. The cold water soaked through Elma's top, and she froze in shock. Then, her voice went shrill. Zoe. What is wrong with you? She screamed. I'm in pain. Can't you show some basic empathy? I ignored her. Our other suite mate, who had been studying in the common room, poked her head in. Elma, starting your period doesn't mean your hands are broken. Zoe isn't your maid. Exactly, another agreed from the doorway. Why should she wash your blood? Elma's face turned an unsightly shade of gray. She bit her lip, her eyes welling with tears, before she threw her wet sheets into her own basket and slammed out of the suite. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed 3 times in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an unsaved number. Zoe, do you have to be such a bully? Would it kill you to help her wash a sheet? She's on her period, for God's sake. She's sitting out on the bench crying her eyes out. How do you sleep at night? Another buzz. I never realized you were this cold-blooded. You won't even help a roommate with a small favor. I am so incredibly disappointed in you. I stared at the screen and let out a dry laugh. I tapped the screen and typed a quick reply. If you want to wash her bloody sheets so badly, go do it yourself. You can lick them clean for all I care. Also, we're broken up. You don't have the right to be disappointed in me. I hit send. Then, I blocked the number. The screen went dark, and I went back to scrubbing. The next morning, I was woken up by a barrage of notifications. My phone was vibrating like a live wire. I squinted at the screen. My sweet mate had sent me a dozen messages, capped off with a link to the campus forum. The headline read, "Exposed, the truth about Columbia's lady-in-waiting. Is Zoe Harrington actually a fraud?" I was wide awake now. I clicked the link. The post had been uploaded at 3 a.m. Remember Zoe Harrington? The girl who follows Charlotte Harrington around like a shadow and spent move-in day making her bed? You thought they were just close roommates? Think again. Her dad is actually a driver for the Harrington family. She's literally domestic help. Turns out she's just a glorified maid. The truth is finally out. Below the post was a laundry list of my crimes. This girl is obsessed with social climbing. She looks down on anyone from a normal background. It's honestly embarrassing sharing a campus with someone this pathetic. At the very bottom of the thread, an anonymous user had commented, "I'm her sweet mate. She never talks to any of us in the dorm. Probably thinks she's too good for us because she gets the Harrington family scraps." That whiny, self-pitying tone, I could recognize Elma's writing anywhere. The post had already gone viral on campus, with hundreds of comments rolling in. Makes sense. No normal person would be that subservient unless they were raised to do it. It's disgusting how she acts so superior just because she gets to carry rich people's bags. Wait, isn't she dating Zach Caldwell from the lacrosse team? What does he see in her? Someone had tagged Zach's account. I clicked his name and saw his public reply from an hour ago. "We broke up. Thanks." Honestly, she was the one who kept throwing herself at me. The comment had hundreds of likes, with people praising him for dodging a bullet. Throwing myself at him? I guess he'd conveniently forgotten how he used to wait outside my lectures for hours just to walk me to the subway. I shut off my phone and stared out the window at the gray, overcast New York morning. Before I could even get out of bed, my academic advisor's office called. "Zoe, please come to my office immediately." Mrs. Albright pushed a stack of printed pages across her mahogany desk. It was the forum thread, with dozens of comments highlighted in bright yellow ink. She frowned, tapping her pen against the wood. "The entire university is talking about this, Zoe," she said. "The allegations of elitism, harassment of low-income students, it's reflecting very poorly on the department. The dean's office is already asking questions." She sighed, softening her tone slightly. "Look, if you just apologize to Elma, we can make this go away." I let the word settle on my tongue. Apologize? She threw a blood-stained sheet into my laundry basin, posted lies online claiming my father is a servant, and orchestrated a targeted harassment campaign against me. "And you want me to apologize to her?" Mrs. Albright's expression hardened. "Zoe, are you trying to make this more difficult than it needs to be?" I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Mrs. Albright, you don't need to worry about this. Once my parents are back in the city, you can discuss this directly with them." Mrs. Albright's brow furrowed. "Fine. Let's get your parents in here. I'd love to see what kind of parents raise a child to be this stubborn." I looked her dead in the eye. "Richard Harrington. Mrs. Albright, would you like me to dial his personal office for you?" The pen slipped from Mrs. Albright's hand, clattering onto the desk. Her lips parted, and she hurriedly pulled up the university's donor directory on her computer. She stopped at a prominent name on the board of trustees. Her face went from irritation to a pale, ghostly white. "Richard, as in Richard Harrington," she stammered. "You're his daughter? Why didn't you say anything?" I didn't answer. I turned, opened the door, and walked out. I was halfway back to my dorm when I saw two figures walking down the tree-lined path. Elma was clinging to Zach's arm, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been weeping for hours. Zach was leaning down, whispering something comforting to her, his expression gentler than I'd ever seen it. When they spotted me, Elma froze, then gripped his arm tighter. Zach's face turned to stone. Elma spoke first. "Zoe. I'm so sorry. I didn't think the post would get this big. I only complained in a private group chat. I have no idea who screenshotted it and put it on the forum. Please don't be mad at me. I'll apologize to you, okay? I'll do whatever you want." Tears began to spill over her eyelashes, perfectly timed. Zach immediately wrapped a protective arm around her shoulder. The practiced choreography of it made my stomach turn. I let out a cold laugh. "Elma, aren't you tired of acting? You've been eyeing Zach since the day we met, haven't you? Too bad he was my boyfriend then, so you had to play the fragile, pity-me card to get his attention." Zach shielded her, his voice rising. "Zoe, shut up." I ignored him, keeping my eyes locked on Elma. "Let me make something clear today. You went through all this trouble to steal a piece of garbage like Zach. You really shouldn't have bothered. If you want him, take him. He's a rotten apple anyway. Yours for free. The air went dead silent. Then, Zach's hand whipped through the air. My brain registered the movement too late to dodge. The slap landed squarely across my left cheek. My head snapped sideways. The force of the blow sent me stumbling backward, my knee slamming hard against the concrete step behind me. A sharp, searing pain shot through my leg. My cheek felt like it was on fire, my ears ringing with a deafening buzz. Zach stood at the top of the steps, looking down at me, his chest heaving, his fists still clenched. Zoe, don't you dare think I won't put you in your place, he breathed, his voice trembling with rage. I've given you enough slack. Apologize to Elma right now. Don't make me force you to your knees. I slowly lifted my head, looking at him, then at Elma, who was trying to look terrified but couldn't quite hide the smug satisfaction dancing in her eyes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I let my eyes water, my voice cracking slightly as I dialed. Dad, my ex-boyfriend just hit me. And he's trying to make me kneel and beg for forgiveness. A few onlookers in the crowd snickered. Is your driver dad going to come down here and kneel with you? Right then, the loud, rhythmic thrum of helicopter blades began to echo over the campus quad. Who dares to bully my youngest daughter? The sound did not begin as a noise, it began as a vibration in the soles of my shoes. The manicured grass of the Columbia quad, usually silent save for the rustle of autumn leaves and the rhythmic scrape of skateboards against granite curbs, began to tremble. The crowd of students who had gathered to watch my humiliation slowed their snickering. A few looked down at their feet, then up at the clear blue sky above Low Memorial Library. The shadow arrived first, a massive, dark silhouette sweeping across the brick pathways, swallowing the sunshine. Then came the roar. A sleek, pitch-black Sikorsky S-76 VIP helicopter descended through the narrow airspace above Morningside Heights. Its rotor wash hit the quad like a localized hurricane. The wind whipped through the trees, tearing golden leaves from their branches and hurling them into the faces of the crowd. Syllabi flew out of open backpacks. Half-empty iced coffees toppled off concrete benches. Elma squealed, her delicate facade vanishing as she clutched her denim jacket against the gale-force wind. Zach had to raise his arms to protect his face, his polished golden boy posture breaking as he squinted into the tempest. The helicopter hovered 10 feet above the center lawn before settling its landing gear onto the pristine turf with a heavy, authoritative thud. The campus security guards who usually harangued students for riding bicycles on the walkways stood frozen, their hands resting uselessly on their utility belts. None of them moved. None of them dared. The pressurized cabin door hissed and slid back. 2 men in charcoal gray three-piece suits stepped out first, deploying a heavy chrome step stool. They didn't look like private guards, they looked like state-level operatives. And behind them came my father. Richard Harrington was not a man who raised his voice in public, but his presence had a way of sucking the oxygen out of a room, or a university campus. He wore a bespoke double-breasted suit that cost more than a year of Columbia's tuition. His hair was iron gray, his jaw set like reinforced steel, and his dark eyes burned with an absolute, terrifying stillness. And behind him, stepping out of the cabin with an ice blue Hermes silk scarf wrapped around her neck, was Charlotte. She had been in Paris 4 hours ago. She had clearly commandeered her own jet, cleared transatlantic airspace on emergency clearance, and met our father at Teterboro Airport. Her heels clicked sharply against the landing gear step as she descended. Her face was devoid of its usual bright, sunlit smile. It was replaced by a look so cold it could have flash-frozen the Hudson River. Zoe, my father called out. His voice was calm, but it possessed a heavy, resonant bass that vibrated straight through the silence of the quad. The crowd of 50-plus students was dead quiet. Nobody breathed. My father walked past the stunned onlookers without bestowing a single glance upon them. His eyes were locked entirely on my left cheek, where Zach's palm print was still throbbing in a dark, raised shade of crimson. When Richard Harrington reached me, he didn't check the sky, he didn't acknowledge the crowd, and he didn't look at the helicopter. He gently lifted my chin with 2 fingers, his hand trembling with a repressed, terrible fury. Who touched you? He asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. Zach was standing 3 feet to my right. His face had drained of every drop of blood, turning a sickly, translucent gray. The arrogant smirk that had sat on his lips for the last 20 minutes was completely gone, replaced by a hollow, wide-eyed terror. He looked at my father, then at the helicopter bearing the Harrington family crest on its tail fin, and finally at Charlotte. Charlotte walked up next to our father. She didn't look at Zach either. She pulled a silk handkerchief from her coat pocket, dipped it into a silver flask of chilled rosewater she took from her security guard, and gently pressed it against my burning cheek. I leave for 48 hours, little sister, Charlotte whispered, her voice tight with suppressed tears, and you let these street dogs bark at you? I was going to handle it, I murmured softly. You're too soft, Zoe, Charlotte said, turning her head slowly to face the crowd. Her eyes scanned the students who, just moments ago, had been calling me a stray, a maid, and a trust fund scrap collector. The moment her gaze landed on them, kids shrank back, stepping behind one another, suddenly deeply interested in the pattern of the brick pavement. Elma was cowering behind Zach. She was clutching the tail of his jacket, her eyes darting frantically from the helicopter to my father's bespoke shoes. Her mind was clearly working at top speed, trying to construct a new lie, a new victim narrative, but the sheer weight of reality was crushing her. You, my father said, turning his body toward Zach. Zach swallowed hard. His throat made a dry, clicking sound. Sir. Mr. Harrington, look, there's been a massive misunderstanding. Did you lay your hands on my daughter? Richard Harrington interrupted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step forward. He simply asked the question. She was being cruel to Elma. Zach stammered, his voice cracking, shedding every bit of his smooth, varsity captain charm. Elma is on financial aid. Zoe was flaunting a Chanel bag, mocking her background, and she threw wet clothes at her. I was just trying to keep the peace. Slap. The sound echoed sharply across the quiet lawn. It wasn't my father who hit him. It was Charlotte. She had stepped forward and delivered a backhand across Zach's face with such precision and force that his head snapped to the side. The gold signet ring on her middle finger left a thin red line across his jawline. Keep her name out of your filthy mouth, Charlotte spat, her tone dripping with utter venom. You think my sister needs to steal from me? You think she carries scraps? Every single piece of real estate on this campus's north side bears our grandfather's name. The library you sleep in during finals was built with our family's foundation money. Charlotte turned to the lead security officer standing behind our father. Mark. Yes, Miss Harrington. Call the NYPD Manhattan North Precinct. I want Mr. Caldwell arrested for felony assault on university grounds immediately. Furthermore, contact the Dean of Student Affairs, the Athletic Director, and the University Legal Counsel. Inform them that if Zach Caldwell is not formally expelled and banned from campus within the hour, the Harrington Foundation will pull its $40 million endowment for the new sports complex by noon. Zach's eyes went wider than silver dollars. Charlotte, Miss Harrington. You can't do that. I'm on a lacrosse scholarship. I have scouts coming from the Premier League next week. My dad is a senior partner at Caldwell and Vance. Your father's law firm handles corporate tax filings for 3 of our subsidiary logistics companies, Richard Harrington said coldly, finally. Speaking directly to Zach. Or rather, they used to. By 3 o'clock today. Your father will be informed that his firm has been dropped from our retainer. He will also be informed precisely why. Zach collapsed backward onto the stone step, his knees giving out entirely. No, please. Zoe, tell them. Tell him we were together for a year. You love me. You bought me that console. Zoe, please. He reached out toward my shoes, trying to grab the hem of my jeans. I stepped back, looking down at him with nothing but pure, unadulterated coldness. I bought you that console with money I earned scrubbing coffee machines, I said quietly, my voice carrying across the silent quad. Because I thought you were a real person. I thought you cared about me for who I was. But you didn't even care enough to check if my last name matched Charlotte's. I thought you were just taking her name because you were her father's driver's daughter. Zach whimpered, his face pale, sweat breaking out across his forehead. Elma told me. Elma showed me the post. Elma's head snapped up. Zach. How could you say that? I never said. You did. Zach screamed, turning on her like a cornered dog, his composure completely disintegrating. You showed me the forum post at 3 in the morning. You said she was a fake. You said she was using me to social climb. You told me she was abusive in the dorm. I was just repeating what people were saying. Elma shrieked, backing away from him as if he had plague. I didn't write it. I'm the victim here. Look at me, I don't have private helicopters. I don't have lawyers. They're picking on me. Because I'm poor. She turned to the crowd, her hands clasped together, tears streaming down her cheeks in a masterclass of tragic theater. Are you all just going to stand there and watch these billionaires crush a normal girl? Is this what Columbia stands for? Not a single student spoke. Not a single person moved to defend her. The crowd had seen the helicopter. They had heard the name Richard Harrington. They had realized, with chilling clarity, that they had spent the last 24 hours mocking the heiress to a multi-billion-dollar energy and real estate empire. The students who had muttered slurs about maids and strays were already melting back into the shadows, terrified that Charlotte's security team was taking mental notes of their faces. Within 5 minutes, 2 black NYPD cruisers pulled onto the pedestrian path, their lights flashing silently. 2 officers stepped out. They didn't even look at Zach's varsity jacket or his trembling posture. Mark, our lead guard, handed them a clear flash drive containing the high-definition security footage from the campus quad cameras, along with the audio log from my phone recording. Zachary Caldwell, the lead officer said, pulling out a pair of steel handcuffs. You're under arrest for third-degree assault. Hands behind your back. Zoe, please. Zach sobbed as the steel clicked around his wrists. He was dragged toward the police car, his polished leather shoes dragging uselessly through the gravel. I was wrong. I was manipulated. Elma tricked me. Zoe. I didn't turn around to watch the police car drive away. Instead, I looked at Elma. She was standing alone on the brick path, clutching her canvas backpack, her lip trembling. But beneath the tears, beneath the trembling chin, I could still see the dark, desperate malice in her eyes. She wasn't sorry. She was only furious that her trap had caught the wrong animal. Mr. Harrington, a shaky, breathless voice called out from down the path. It was Mrs. Albright, my academic advisor. She was running toward us, her silk blouse stained with sweat, her glasses slipping down her nose. Behind her was the Vice Dean of Student Affairs, looking like a man walking toward a firing squad. Mr. Harrington, Miss Harrington, please, accept our deepest apologies, Mrs. Albright gasped, holding her side. There was a severe miscommunication in my office earlier. I had no idea we were attempting to manage the campus situation. Save it, Mrs. Albright, Richard Harrington said, his voice dropping into a register that made the advisor flinch. My daughter came to this university under a pseudonym set up in her registration file because she wanted an honest, unearned education. She didn't ask for special treatment. She lived in a standard dorm. She ate diner food. And when she was slandered and harassed, your solution was to demand she apologize to her abuser. We were misled by the Forum Post, the Vice Dean began. My legal team will be at the administration building in 20 minutes, my father said, turning his back on them. Every administrator who handled this file will be scrutinized. If I find a single trace of gross negligence, complicity, or administrative bias, I will personally fund the legal defense of every student you have ever unfairly disciplined, and I will tear this department down board by board. He looked at me, his eyes instantly softening. Zoe. Pack your things. You're coming home. No, I said quietly. My father paused. Charlotte looked at me, surprised. I'm staying in the dorm tonight, I said, looking directly at Elma. I have laundry to finish. The suite was dead silent when I walked back in at 5 o'clock that evening. Our 2 other roommates, who had previously been neutral bystanders, had completely cleared out. Their desks were neat, their laptops gone, they had fled to the library or friends' apartments, terrified of being caught in the crossfire of the storm that was currently consuming the university. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The room felt different now. The thin, sun-bleached curtains and the wooden desk that had seemed cozy 2 days ago now felt like props on a stage that had been burned to the ground. The suite door opened slowly. Elma crept inside. She looked like a ghost. Her eyes were swollen, her hair frizzy, her hands clutching a printed letter from the dean's office. She didn't speak at first. She walked over to her desk, her movement stiff, and began packing her notebooks into her canvas bag. The bravado, the martyrs' pride, the delicate tears, all of it had evaporated, leaving behind a bitter, sharp husk of a person. You must feel so proud of yourself, she said softly, her back turned to me. I pulled my laptop onto my lap. About what? You played us all, she spat, whipping around to face me, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and envy. You sat there in your plain clothes, eating $5 salads, letting everyone think you were nothing. You watched me struggle to pay my lab fees. You watched me count quarters for the vending machine. You could have bought this entire building with your pocket change, but you let me look like a fool. I looked up from my screen, staring at her with genuine amazement. Elma, I said, my voice steady and measured. I never asked you about your finances. I never mocked your clothes. I gave you space, I kept to myself, and when my sister gave me a bag, I accepted it because she's my sister. You were The one who looked at me and decided I was beneath you. You were Charlotte's servant. Elma yelled, stepping forward, her fingernails digging into her palms. You fetched her coffee. You folded her clothes. Don't deny it. I saw you. Why would anyone do that unless they were paid to? Because I love my sister, I said simply. It's a very simple concept, Elma. Some people do nice things for the people they care about without expecting a price tag attached to it. But I guess that's foreign to you. Elma flinched as if I had slapped her. You ruined Zach, she whispered, her voice venomous. His family is falling apart. His father called him from the precinct screaming. They're dropping his firm. He's going to be kicked off the team, his scholarship is gone, and he's facing criminal charges. All because of a silly mistake. A slap isn't a mistake, I replied cold and clear. It's a crime. And if he was stupid enough to throw his life away because you whispered sweet little lies in his ear, then he deserves every single thing coming to him. Elma let out a harsh, ugly laugh. You think you're so clean, don't you? You think because you have money, you're the good guy here? I know how the world works, Zoe. People like you walk all over people like me, and when we try to take a little piece for ourselves, you call the cops and bring down helicopters. Take a little piece? I asked, leaning forward. Is that what you call posting fake slander online? Is that what you call throwing your period blood on my sister's sheets? Elma opened her mouth to shoot back another venomous response, but before she could utter a syllable, the suite door swung open with a bang. 2 men in gray suits stepped inside, followed immediately by 2 officers from the University Police Department and a woman in a sharp navy blazer holding a leather briefcase. Elma Marshall? The woman in the blazer asked, her tone efficient and ice-cold. Elma swallowed hard, stepping back toward her bed. Yes, who are you? I am Victoria Vance, Senior Litigation Counsel representing the Harrington Estate and Columbia University's Board of Ethics, the woman said, opening her briefcase and pulling out a thick sheaf of legal documents. We are executing a formal court-ordered search and seizure of your university-provided dorm quarters, as well as serving you with 3 separate legal actions. Elma's face went completely ash-gray. What? You can't search my stuff. I have rights. This room is university property, Miss Marshall, the campus police officer said firmly. And under the emergency disciplinary injunction issued by the Dean's office 1 hour ago, your housing contract has been provisionally revoked, pending criminal and academic investigation. Victoria Vance handed Elma a paper. Document 1, a civil suit for defamation, tortious interference, and intentional infliction of emotional distress filed in New York State Supreme Court, seeking damages in the amount of $2 million. Elma gasped, dropping the paper as if it were coated in poison. $2 million? I don't have $200. Which brings us to document 2, Vance continued smoothly, stepping past her to point at Elma's desk. A grand jury subpoena for your personal computer, mobile devices, and financial records. Our forensic cyber team spent the last 4 hours tracing the IP addresses associated with the forum post, exposed the truth about Columbia's lady-in-waiting. Not only did we trace the original post directly to your laptop's MAC address, but we also discovered something far more interesting. Vance pulled a second folder from her bag and opened it. Over the past 3 months, 3 separate female students in your previous dormitory reported missing luxury items, a Cartier bracelet, a pair of Chanel earrings, and $1,200 in cash from a sorority fund. The campus police were unable to find the culprit. Elma froze. Her eyes darted wildly toward her closet, her chest heaving in shallow, panicked gasps. However, Vance continued, her voice echoing with devastating precision in the small dorm room, when our private investigator audited your personal Venmo and secondary banking accounts an hour ago, which were unlocked via a subpoena granted due to the severity of the cyberbullying charges, we found several large cash deposits matching the exact resale values of those missing items, paid out by a luxury consignment shop on 72nd Street. No. Elma squeaked, her knees trembling so violently she had to hold on to the bed frame. No, that's not mine. Somebody put that money there. Officers, Vance said calmly. Please secure her devices and perform the search. The 2 officers stepped forward with clear evidence bags. Within 3 minutes, tucked deep inside the lining of Elma's winter coat in the back of her closet, they pulled out 2 designer watches, 3 pairs of high-end sunglasses, and a stack of pawn shop receipts, all belonging to various girls across campus. Elma collapsed onto the floor, pulling her legs up to her chest, sobbing hysterically. But this time, there was no audience to pity her. There was no Zach to shield her body with his own There were no crowd members to whisper about the cruel rich girl picking on the poor scholarship student. She was just a thief, a liar, and a bully, caught red-handed in the center of her own web. Elma Marshall, the police officer said, pulling her up by her elbow and placing her in handcuffs. You're under arrest for grand larceny, receiving stolen property, and computer tampering. You have the right to remain silent. As they led her out of the suite, her feet dragging against the floorboards, she looked back at me one last time. Her face was soaked in tears, her hair wild, her mascara running down her cheeks in dark, messy streaks. Zoe. She whimpered, her voice tiny, stripped of every ounce of spite. Please, talk to your dad, please. I'll be ruined. I sat on my bed, watching her go. You ruined yourself, Elma, I said softly. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving the dorm room dead quiet. By Wednesday morning, the atmosphere on Columbia's campus had undergone a terrifying, total metamorphosis. The viral forum post had been scrubbed from the server overnight, replaced by an official, red-letter announcement from the office of the president. The statement formally apologized to the Harrington family, announced the immediate expulsion and arrest of Elma Marshall for criminal grand larceny and targeted cyber harassment, and confirmed the indefinite suspension and academic review of Zachary Caldwell. Walking across the quad was like walking through a graveyard of terrified socialites. Students who had snickered at me on Monday now practically threw themselves out of my path when I walked by. When I entered the campus coffee shop, the very same espresso bar where I had spent 8 hours a day on my feet to buy Zach's birthday present, the manager nearly knocked over a grinder trying to hand me a free iced latte, stuttering apologies about the poor lighting in the shop. I didn't take the free coffee. I paid my $4.50, tipped the barista $20, and sat down at a small table near the window. 5 minutes later, the brass bell above the door chimed. Zach walked in. Or rather, what was left of Zach. He was wearing a plain gray hoodie with the hood pulled low over his forehead, trying to hide the dark, purplish bruise along his jaw where Charlotte's signet ring had caught him. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale and splotchy. When he spotted me sitting by the window, his entire body twitched. He looked around frantically, checking if Charlotte or her 8 security guards were lurking in the corners. Seeing that I was alone, he walked toward my table with slow, cautious steps, as if approaching a sleeping tiger. Zoe. He rasped, his voice cracked and hollow. I blew gently on my latte and didn't look up. Sit down, Zach. You're drawing a crowd again, and you know how much you hate public drama. He flinched and sat down on the edge of the wooden chair opposite me, clutching his hands together in his lap. His knuckles were raw and white. Zoe, please, he whispered, leaning across the small table. My dad beat me last night. He threw me out of the house. The firm lost the Harrington account this morning. 3 other major clients pulled their retainers because of the reputation hit. The firm is going under, Zoe. My dad says if I can't fix this with you, he's cutting me off completely. He reached across the table, trying to take my hand, but I shifted my cup, leaving his fingers hovering uselessly in the cold air. And your lacrosse scholarship? I asked politely. A tear leaked out of his bloodshot eye, tracing a wet path down his bruised cheek. Revoked this morning. The athletic director said my conduct violated the student-athlete integrity clause. I'm banned from the NCAA. He suddenly dropped to his knees right there on the tiled floor of the coffee shop, grabbing the edge of my table, his chin quivering uncontrollably. Zoe, please. I'm begging you. I was stupid. I was blind. Elma tricked me, she kept telling me you were lying to me, she made me feel like I was being taken advantage of. I loved you, Zoe. You know I loved you. You loved me? I repeated quietly. I set my coffee cup down with a soft clink. Zach, when you asked me to be your girlfriend outside the library last year, do you remember what you said? He nodded desperately, tears pouring down his face. I said you were the brightest, most genuine girl I ever met. I said your laugh lit up the campus. And do you remember what I did when you said you wanted that gaming console? I asked, my voice dropping into a razor-thin quietness. I didn't ask my father for money. I didn't pull out a Harrington credit card. I wanted to give you something real. So I came here. Right to this shop. Zach blinked, looking around at the espresso machines, the steam wands, the heavy milk jugs. I stood behind that counter for 40 hours a week, I said softly, staring into his eyes. My ankles swelled so badly my skin split. I tutored a 3rd grader in Queens after my classes, riding the 7 train back at midnight. Just so I could earn $900 with my own 2 hands. Because I believed that love meant giving someone your sincere effort. Zach's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The realization hit him like a physical impact, caving in his chest. And on your birthday, I continued, when I gave you that box, you didn't even open it. You tossed it onto a couch, laughed with your fraternity brothers, and went out to drink shots. And 3 weeks later, when you saw me carrying a bag my sister gave me, you called me a stray. You called my bag a cheap street knockoff. And then you hit me. Zoe. I didn't mean to hit you. I lost my temper. I was confused. You weren't confused, Zach, I said, leaning forward until I was inches from his pale, trembling face. You were arrogant. You thought I was a nobody, so you thought you could step on me to make yourself look like a big man in front of a pretty liar. You didn't care about dignity. You only cared about power. I stood up, pulling my jacket around my shoulders. Where is the console, Zach? He swallowed hard, his voice barely a breath. What? The console I bought you. Where is it? It's in my dorm room. Have it delivered to my father's estate by 5 o'clock today, I said calmly. If it has a single scratch on it, my father's legal team will add property destruction to the civil suit currently pending against your family. Zoe, please. He sobbed, reaching for the hem of my coat as I turned away. What about us? Can't we start over? I don't care about the money, I swear. I'll work at the coffee shop. I'll do whatever you want. I stopped at the glass door of the coffee shop, looking back at him over my shoulder. You said it yourself, Zach. A designer bag on me looked like a knockoff to you. And a boy like you, no matter how shiny you looked on the outside, was always just cheap merchandise. I pushed open the door, letting the cold autumn air wash over me, leaving him sobbing on the floor behind me. That afternoon, the Harrington family townhome on the Upper East Side was silent, save for the crackle of the wood-burning fireplace in the main drawing room. Charlotte was sitting on a plush velvet sofa, wearing a cashmere lounge set, lazily sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea while scrolling through a tablet. Across from her, 3 senior partners from the city's top corporate law firms were standing attentively, taking rapid notes on leather-bound pads. The Caldwell family's loan covenants with Manhattan National Bank, Charlotte said softly, without looking up from her screen. Who holds the primary debt? Our subsidiary, Apex Holdings, acquired 60% of their commercial mortgage notes 2 years ago, Miss Harrington, the lead attorney replied crisply. If we execute the acceleration clause due to their breach of the ethical representation agreement, their entire estate goes into technical default by Friday morning. Do it, Charlotte said, taking a delicate sip of her tea. And the Marshall girl? She has been formally charged with 3 counts of grand larceny in the 3rd degree, 1 count of computer fraud, and civil defamation, the second lawyer answered. Her bail has been set at $50,000. Her parents arrived from Ohio an hour ago. They are currently attempting to mortgage their family farm to post bail, but the local bank in their hometown is, ironically, a regional branch under our foundation's commercial network. Instruct the bank to deny the equity loan, Charlotte said coolly. She can wait for her trial in Rikers Island. Charlotte, I said, walking into the drawing room and tossing my coat over an armchair. The 3 attorneys immediately bowed their heads slightly in my direction. Miss Zoe. Leave us for a moment, Charlotte instructed them. The lawyers gathered their papers, bowed again, and exited the drawing room, closing the heavy oak doors behind them. Charlotte set her teacup down and looked at me. The icy, murderous expression she had held for the last 2 days vanished instantly, replaced by the soft, overly affectionate look she only ever used for me. Come here, Zoe Bear, she murmured, opening her arms. I sighed, walking over and letting her pull me down onto the velvet sofa beside her. She immediately wrapped a warm cashmere throw around my shoulders, tucking it under my chin, then leaned over to inspect my left cheek. The red mark had faded to a faint pink shadow, but Charlotte's eyes darkened again just looking at it. I still want to break his fingers, she muttered. Charlotte, you already destroyed his father's law firm, got him expelled from Columbia, banned from the NCAA, and wiped out his family's credit line, I said, leaning my head against her shoulder. I think his fingers are the least of his problems. Not enough, Charlotte grumbled, stroking my hair. He touched my baby sister. If father hadn't held me back on the quad, would have run him over with the helicopter. I let out a soft laugh, the first real, genuine laugh I had uttered in days. You know, I whispered, looking into the roaring fireplace, everyone on campus thought I was your slave. They couldn't wrap their heads around why I folded your clothes or made your bed. Charlotte paused, her hand coming to rest on my hair. Her expression softened, Rare, vulnerable warmth filling her eyes. When we were 8 years old, Charlotte said quietly, and mother passed away. Father was working 18 hours a day to keep the board from devouring the company. I locked myself in my bedroom for 2 weeks, refusing to eat. She looked down at me, her thumb gently touching my cheek. Do you remember what you did, Zoe? I shook my head slowly. I was 6. I barely remember. You dragged a plastic footstool to the kitchen counter, Charlotte said, a tear glistening in her eye. You made me a peanut butter sandwich, mostly crusts and far too much jelly, and you carried a heavy glass of water up 3 flights of stairs without spilling a single drop. You pushed it under my door, sat in the hallway, and sang nursery rhymes until I finally opened the door. Charlotte pulled me tighter into her embrace. From that day on, I swore to God that no one in this world would ever hurt you, look down on you, or make you feel small. If you want to carry my coffee, I'll let you, because I know it comes from love. But if anyone mistakes your kindness for weakness, I will burn their world to ash. I buried my face into her shoulder, feeling the tight, painful knot that had been sitting in my chest for the last 3 days finally release its grip. I don't want to live in the dorms anymore, I whispered. Good, Charlotte smiled, kissing the top of my head. Because Father bought the entire brownstone on 113th Street this morning. We're converting the top 3 floors into a private penthouse for the 2 of us. And this time, security sits in the lobby. 3 weeks later, the annual Columbia University Benefactors Gala was held in the Grand Ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. It was the premier event of the academic year, where board members, wealthy alumni, high-level faculty, and select student leaders gathered to sip vintage champagne and celebrate the university's multi-million-dollar research grants. Usually, student attendance was a privilege reserved for the varsity team, captains, student council presidents, and high-ranking scholars. Tonight, however, the atmosphere in the ballroom was tense, thick with unspoken gossip and suppressed anxiety. Zach Caldwell was not there in his tuxedo. His name had been scrubbed from the program. His family's legacy table at the front of the stage had been revoked and reassigned. Elma Marshall was not there either. She was currently sitting in a holding cell at Rose M. Singer Center on Rikers Island, waiting for her public defender to negotiate a plea deal that would likely result in 2 years of state probation and a permanent felony criminal record. At 8 o'clock sharp, the double doors of the ballroom swung open. The room went dead silent. I walked in first. I was no longer wearing the $5 oversized sweaters or the scuffed sneakers I had favored in the dorms. I wore a custom floor-length sapphire silk gown designed by Atelier Versace, its deep blue fabric clinging to my silhouette and pooling around my feet like liquid velvet. Around my neck sat a vintage Cartier diamond choker that had belonged to my mother, catching the glittering light of the crystal chandeliers in brilliant bursts of blue and white fire. Beside me walked Charlotte, stunning in a sharp, tailored white tuxedo gown, her posture regal and uncompromising. And behind us came Richard Harrington. As we walked through the center aisle, the crowd of professors, trustees, and students instinctively parted, making way for us like waters parting before a tidal wave. Mrs. Albright, my former academic advisor, was standing near the buffet table, clutching a glass of white wine with trembling fingers. When my eyes met hers, she immediately dropped her gaze, taking a hurried, awkward step backward into the shadow of a marble pillar. The vice dean of student affairs rushed forward, his face flushed, holding out 2 crystal champagne flutes. Mr. Harrington. Miss Harrington. Miss Zoe, he stammered, bowing his head so low his tie nearly dipped into the glasses. We are so honored by your presence tonight. The university board has just unanimously approved the renaming of the new Humanities Center in Miss Zoe's honor. Save the flattery, Dean, Richard Harrington said, stepping past him without taking the champagne. My daughters and I are here for 30 minutes to confirm the final signatures on the foundation grant. After that, we have a plane to catch for Swiss winter holiday. I paused near the edge of the balcony overlooking the main floor. Through the tall arched windows of the plaza, I could see the cold New York night, the yellow taxis zooming down Fifth Avenue, the glowing lights of Central Park South, the quiet, distant world that moved on regardless of who was rising or falling in the high-stakes theater of the elite. My phone buzzed softly in my sapphire clutch bag. I pulled it out. It was an automated notification from my private bank app. Transaction complete, incoming wire transfer of $900. 00 from local pawn shop. Asset recovery. It was the money from Zach's gaming console. My father's team had repossessed it from his dorm room, listed it on a high-end luxury electronics resale hub, and deposited every single cent back into my personal checking account. The $900 I had earned with my own sweat, my own sore feet, and My own quiet patience was finally back where it belonged. I smiled softly, swiping the notification away, and looked up at the glittering chandelier above. Zoe? Charlotte's voice called out gently behind me. She was standing near the head table, holding out her hand toward me, her eyes shining with warmth. Father is ready to sign the papers. Come sit next to me. Coming, Charlotte, I said. I adjusted the diamond strap on my shoulder, walked past the silent, watching crowd, and took my rightful place at the head of the table.